Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our panel on advancing digital equity for the Black community. My name is Anthony Green. I'm a technology journalist. My work has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, NPR, MIT Technology Review, and other places. I now serve as a senior producer, co-creator, and art director for a new podcast about our shifting trust in artificial intelligence. It's called Shift, and I would love to introduce my esteemed panel, starting with Dr. Nicole Turner-Lee. She is the director of the Center for Technology and Innovation at the Brookings Institution, and she also serves as the co-editor-in-chief of Tech Tank. Next is Dr. John Gant, director at the Department of Commerce, NTIA, Office of Minority Broadband Initiatives. Next we have Sean Mickens, associate vice president of external affairs at Comcast. And certainly not least, we have Justice Ukadike, manager, senior analyst for U.S. government affairs and public policy at Google. All right, thanks so much for joining us. So, guys, as we know, Black communities face barriers to accessing and affording technologies. But since COVID-19, it kind of seems that stakeholders in the tech sector and decision makers as well, have increased their efforts to advance digital equity. So I'm curious, what in your opinion, I'd like to start with you actually, Nicole, have kind of been the most exciting or productive developments, right, over the past 2 or 3 years?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say good morning, everybody, and I'm glad to be home. I work at Brookings now, but I started my career in Washington, D.C. at the Joint Center as the director and first director of the Media and Technology Institute. And I'm not only glad to be home, but I told John it's been a long time since we wrote that 2009 report on how people of color use the internet. So I'm really excited to be sitting here today and humbled by the invitation, and also to my friends here as well. So I think one of the things that I'd like to point out, and I'm going to do a shameless plug, I have a book coming out in February called Digitally Invisible: How the Internet is Creating the New Underclass. And this book will be published by Brookings Press, and if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll get updates. But one of the things that I actually argue in this book, after going around the country before the pandemic, is that we've had a digital divide for many, many decades. Starting when I was actually in community technology in the west and south side of Chicago, working on opening labs for people of color, the challenge has always been the extent to which we've taken this phenomenon seriously. And so it's been no secret that Black and brown people have not been connected to, back then, and I'm gonna age myself, the World Wide Web, and now to this internet that has evolved into artificial intelligence. And so this conversation around the intersection between race, place, and space has been real. And what the pandemic demonstrated as an opportunity is that there were more people paying attention. We didn't have a lot of people paying attention to the fact that Kiana was already sitting in the parking lot of McDonald's doing her homework before the pandemic. But we actually saw that become a headline when it became revealed not only were our kids, Black kids, sitting in parking lots, but they were also falling behind in terms of schoolwork. And so the opportunity for all of us to talk about digital equity is to get it right this time. We actually have, coming out of the pandemic and with the infrastructure bill, probably quadrupled the amount of money we've had since President Obama when it comes to actually addressing connectivity. In my book, I say we started actually the digital divide with President Clinton, and here we are today still talking about it. But this time we've got resources around it. And most importantly, and I'll just sort of end here, because you already know I'm like a preacher talking about digital equity, and I will sit myself down before I go too far, is that the other challenge that we have is now that we have more people understanding what it's like to be in a less analog world. Opportunity, we can now have people have closer proximity to healthcare, education, employment opportunities, public benefits, you name it, entrepreneurship, it's a click away. Disadvantage, if we don't get it right in terms of changing the equation that digital access is not just about shiny objects and internet access, we will still be the products of that technology. And if you follow AI, we're still commoditized as Black people. And so I just think going forward, having this conversation of what true digital equity means is sort of contextualizing the same way we talk about voting rights equity, economic mobility equity, social mobility, and educational equity. It's all in the same. So I'll stop there and then come on back when it's my turn again.
Not a problem.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. Really happy to be here. My name is John Gant, and I am with the Department of Commerce, NTIA, and I'm the director of the Office of Minority Broadband Initiatives. And as Nicole, my friend, alluded to, that I was also a senior fellow at the Joint Center, where we produced the first report looking at minority broadband adoption in the United States as well. And I'm really pleased to be here today and really think about this, especially over the span of time, because both Nicole and I have been working in this space for over 25 years as well. And we've seen where we were and where we are now. I'm really, at the Department of Commerce with NTIA, we're helping to implement President Biden's Internet for All program, as Nicole alluded to. We're looking at $65 billion that's really focused on trying to improve access and digital equity. What's different now about this versus, and think about effective strategies for doing it, it's a strategy where it's not only about access and getting places that are unserved and underserved across the United States, but hand in glove is also thinking about the equity question and baking that into how we are doing our deployment as well. This is a whole of country approach where we really is an opportunity for everybody to have a voice in shaping how this network is, we're making all these connections happen and so forth. I've cut my teeth learning about this and helping to build one of the first gigabit fiber broadband networks in the United States that connected folks on the other side of the digital divide. And a key part of what we did first was to make sure we were working with folks all across communities, have a voice in how the network was being deployed, but also having a voice in workforce development, who's getting the jobs, in economic development in terms of subcontracting and being vendors and helping to actually build out and deploy this. But then this other part of the divide that we talk a lot about, we talk about deployment divide, adoption divide, but there's this outcome divide is what we're talking about. And so right now, this is a time to have a voice in trying to shape what are the outcomes and how they can really improve telehealth, entrepreneurship, and I call that the digital mismatch, right? It goes hand in glove with this because we look at these inequalities. It's like building the highway in the 50s and 60s that tore apart our cities. Are we doing the same thing as we're building out broadband? And is there a mismatch there we've got to deal with? So that complements this, this problem that we've got to really figure out how to do that. And I've been, again, being a professor, I was dean at North Carolina Central University before I joined the Department of Commerce, of the School of Library and Information Science, the only library and information science program at an HBCU in the United States. And that's really hard to imagine in this day and age. There's already a divide with lack of computer science, and so forth, and so we've got to think about bridging those divides. But there's a lot that we can talk about. Happy to share the floor with everybody here as well, and thanks. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Sean Mickens. I serve as the Associate Vice President of External Affairs for Comcast, NBCUniversal. I've been one of the people who've worked very closely with Nicole Turner-Lee over the years, my good sister, mentor, friend, when it comes to talking about broadband access deployment. I think as we talk about the opportunities that really have existed over the past 2 years that have been impactful for Black communities and how we think about our future in terms of digital equity, I think the infrastructure bill that Nicole mentioned just a moment ago, which was that large investment that had 3 major components to it, one being the Affordable Connectivity Program, the other being BEAD, which focuses on our broadband equity access and deployment, and then third component just focusing on digital equity has truly been the things that give me at least the greatest bit of hope. I think the pandemic showed us something that we used to joke about a long time. Those of us who have been working in telecom and tech policy, we were just like, this is always talked about as a separate issue from everything else. It's always telecom and tech policy, but one day we're gonna look up and it's just gonna be policy. And the reality is, over the pandemic, it really has become the underbedding of policy. We talk about an online census, we talk about creative new ways of voting, civic engagement, and everything to that respect. And so the way that Comcast has been a partner in this space for years is to, for at least over the past 12 years, we've had a low-cost, affordable connection program called Internet Essentials, which was to help low-income communities be able to gain access to the internet, but also to teach them some of the digital skills that are necessary for them to grow in that space. And as we've seen the investments come in from the government over the past 2 years, we've been doubling down on those efforts of increasing the ways in which people talk about not just having affordable access to the internet, but also understanding how to utilize it once you're on there. We're always constantly talking about fake news. We're always constantly talking about misinformation, disinformation. So making sure that when people are, and fraud, online fraud is also a big issue for us. And so I think as we talk about individuals getting access to the internet, we're also talking about them building the digital skills necessary to actually utilize it and to understand all the possibilities that they can have. There are so many digital entrepreneurs within our community that have grown. I think many people have plenty of friends and relatives who have started their own online businesses as their side hustles or their main hustles. And that goes to show you that there are ways in which you don't have to always be tied to the traditional form of job seeking, that there are greater opportunities in entrepreneurship. And so as we're talking about like these investments in digital equity skills building as well as access and deployment of the internet, what we're really talking about is allowing the next generation of our community to be able to be the business leaders, the entrepreneurs that we all have dreamed about and that many of our ancestors have dreamed about.
Oh, yes. Good morning, everybody. Justice Ukadike here. I'm a public policy manager at Google. In July was actually 9 years at Google for me. I started off as actually an intern back in our people operations organization back in 2013, converted full-time, came back, held a number of roles in our people operations org, our special projects organization, our real estate portfolio org, and recently a government and public policy team. So I stand here, I think, as a testament to what it means to bridge both the technology and society piece of what this all means and of this moment that we find ourselves in. And I'm so humbled and honored to be able to share the stage with some folks that I've admired from afar for a really, really long time, and just really, really critically humbled to be here. Let me take a moment to recognize and praise the deep work Dr. Grant and the teams at Commerce and NTIA have done, and complementary efforts of FCC have been to advance and deploy, depending on how it's tabulated, something like $50 to $100 billion in COVID recovery, and IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law appropriations to fully connect the U.S., as a number of panelists have cited here today, with a keen emphasis on our community. Alongside these critical efforts, equity grants, connectivity programs, including the ACP, I'm increasingly optimistic that we may actually be building towards a future and a reality where every black home, every black learner, every black student, every black worker may actually be able to have high quality, high fidelity internet and connectivity at their home, and it's durable and it's high quality, which we know is increasingly going to be a prerequisite to being able to contribute and participate and build economic opportunity in this country today and in the world more broadly. Where Google really focuses its effort on is maybe a little less on the connectivity piece and more on applying the digital tools, services, and applications that folks can actually use to thrive and build economic opportunity in our digital world. These are first principles for our teams. Our mission is to organize all the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful for folks. So this really means, and I guess I would hazard, continues to be, even after COVID, it has put in stark relief the contours and urgency of actually doing this right now. The need for teleconferencing solutions for folks so that they can stay connected to their jobs, for students in their schools, and for patients to their telehealth needs. One kind of critical focus that we have at Google is to expand the pool of digital practitioners and technologists with a lens to meeting folks where they're at. Our Google Career Certificates program helps develop job-ready skills for folks in high-demand fields with no experience or degrees required. To date, over 100,000 people have earned a Google Career Certificate from states across the US, and a supermajority of these folks, something like 75%, have reported that these have had a positive impact on their career, like a new job, a raise, or a promotion. And the program has a track record of helping workers from all backgrounds, and over 50% of graduates identify as Asian, Black, or Latino. So we see this as kind of a key entree to ensuring that that gap is bridged, right, both to the connectivity, but then also to the digital transformation that's required, the skill sets that are required to harness and actually take advantage of all of this work. And we continue to bring the skills directly to learners across the US and partner with the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. Grow with Google launched our Career Readiness Program, which helps Black students at more than 30 HBCUs prepare for workforce training and applications through digital skilling programs as well. And then last year, we announced over $8 million in support and resources for job seekers impacted by the criminal justice system, including digital skills training and automatic record clearance. This includes about $1 million in support of the National Urban League's Urban Tech Jobs program as well, and aimed at job readiness, career readiness, resume building, and broader career tooling. And then lastly, I'll just let me wrap this introduction by saying we also continue to evolve this program, which now includes 5 new industry specializations, which are a collection of programs developed in partnership with leading universities and targeted towards kind of the fastest growing industries, including healthcare and IT support in partnership with Johns Hopkins, data analytics for the public sector in partnership with the University of Michigan, and financial analysis in partnership with the University of Illinois Business School. And then let me just quickly wrap by noting and recognizing the intersectionality of all of the challenges that we face, the geographic intersectionality of the challenges that we face. We know that over a third of folks living in rural and tribal communities report that they have limited access to high-speed broadband, and this deficit means critical education, health, and other needs are just, quite frankly, unavailable to millions of Americans. So, which is why we are also focusing and training resources, $10 million most recently with our National Digital Inclusion Alliance work to ensure that that digital divide is bridged as well. And I'll just wrap by saying that it is not just the resources. It is critical that we have analytic plans and infrastructure in place to ensure that the measurements, science around actually making sure that these are effective and deployed broadly is there. And so I look forward to more conversation here.
Lots going on at Google. Not shocked. Honestly, Justice, I'd like to stick with you for a bit here for this next question, right? Because, I mean, as these digital technologies continue to transform our day-to-day lives and become ever more present throughout society, right? The Joint Center has done a lot of work on ensuring that people aren't left behind, right? I'm talking about the digital divide here. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, what challenges do you feel government, industry, nonprofits should come together on to address, right, in the short term, and then maybe a look at the longer term view horizon?
Absolutely, and I think I'll probably bifurcate this into 2, right? So on the one hand, I think it's critical that we identify, invest in, and coalesce around those kind of key and critical high leverage point opportunities to actually accelerate this work, right? And everybody is implicated here, right? Industry, from third party, civil society, onto and including government as well. And so it's critical that we all understand the comparative advantage and really lean into it. I would say, from my vantage that, in keeping with my earlier remarks around the capacity building, that we should also work to scale up these efforts and understand how, in short, training efforts into the space that we know works, and then ensuring that we're investing and bringing capacity there as well. And I think that one last bit I want to frame here is also being clear about identifying opportunities for in this context of the digital divide, next generation emerging applications to innovate around this conversation. So for example, our X is our moonshot factory. So the theory here is that we, instead of just 10%ing things and incremental improvement on access to connectivity, for example, we can 10x that. And so inside of our X moonshot factory is a project called Tara. And so in Tara, they use basically visual light or optical light transmission to accelerate and deliver high quality, high fidelity internet to users across the world. Right now, we're deployed in Africa, in some countries in Asia, and as well as Latin America. And so I think there's an opportunity here to get pull energy around behind that and such next generation solutions to also accelerate the work that we have to do here.
It's really important stuff. And just for context, when he says X, we are not referring to Twitter.
Not Twitter.
Maybe ever.
Yeah.
No. All right. No, let's keep it going. Let's go down the line here. Sean, please, I'd love your thoughts on this.
So I think when we talk about short term, how many people in here are familiar with the Affordable Connectivity Program? Show of hands. Great. This is very easy, so I don't have to go into heavy detail on that. But right now, what we're anticipating is that ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program, is getting ready to run out around the first portion of next year. This provides, for those who don't know, this provides a $30 subsidy for people to have access to high-speed broadband internet access. All of your major ISPs in the country have all pledged to participate in the ACP program, and all have affordable, some version of a program, low-income program, that allows people to utilize that $30 to have full access to high-speed internet and broadband access. This was originally put in as an emergency measure in the infrastructure bill, but right now people are trying to make sure that we can extend it. Currently, there's a little over 21 million Americans who are enrolled in the ACP program, and so continuing to fund that program, to getting our Congress to reauthorize funding for this program, I think is something in the short term that can be immediately impactful for everyday people as we're continuing to work to get more people signed up. I think, you know, as we talk about the long term of this, what we're really looking at are ways in which we continue to invest in a number of the community partners that many of our companies and organizations support, whether it be things like Urban Tech Jobs, which you mentioned a moment ago at the National Urban League, whether it be with the National Skills Coalition, really leveraging a number of partners and community organizations who've been in these fights for years and understand the importance of digital technology, to be advocates, to be digital navigators, to train people in local communities on how to utilize these tools better. I think as we're talking about more of the funding from the infrastructure bill coming out, particularly those focused on the digital equity spaces, it will be good to encourage these organizations and fund and support these community partners as they're working to be digital navigators to get people connected and understand how to utilize the internet better. The realities that we're really dealing with right now you just need digital skills in order to be an economically viable person in America. That's the future. And so everything that we should be doing is working on making sure that the people have what they need to be able to be active participants in their democracy and contributors to the economy.
Great, thank you. That's good. So I just want to give a little bit more context about what we do at NTIA. So we run the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program as well as the Digital Equity Program. And then my Office of Minority Broadband Initiatives helps to implement both of those programs. And so we've got $42.5 billion for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, where that is building out internet across the country in unserved and underserved areas. We also have tribal broadband programs to get into those tribal areas that you mentioned as well too, and a middle mile program as well. But my office also directs the Connecting Minorities Community Pilot Program. So I oversee a program of about $300 million where we've connected, working with 93 historically black colleges and universities, minority serving institutions, and tribal colleges and universities from around the United States. And these universities are doing deployment programs to improve connectivity on their campus. And we look at the universities as anchor institutions. And when you look at the mission of an HBCU, and I was at North Carolina Central for a good while, we're also part of our anchor communities too. So it's a model where we're making investments into the HBCUs and also the surrounding community around them as well to help implement these various programs, the Digital Navigator program, digital literacy programs, digital training programs, and so forth. There is a great opportunity for everybody to join in and help with the HBCUs and the MSIs and others that are doing this work as well. One of our federal program officers, Michelle Lamel, is here as well, and we are doing what we can to make sure that all of our grantees are also part of the BEAD and digital equity programs too. And so that's a great place, and right now the door is open, and I can't tell you, this is a once-in-a-generation level funding that is available. And the door is open now for everybody to, if you've got a need, you know that if it's your church, it's your community center, it's your schools, it's your HBCU, it's your neighborhood that's not connected, go to your state broadband office, raise your hand and say, we've got these needs that are here. Get involved in the process of these applications that are being developed. Each state is allocated roughly about $1.5 billion. get involved, get your voice in there to make sure that all the needs are addressed. And then we're looking at the future emerging. We've got a CHIPS program, and we're working, our office is working with the CHIPS program too. This is a program to help manufacturing around computer chips. And there's a major workforce development component. There's great opportunity for economic development, workforce development, and so forth. And right now, the door is wide open to get involved with these very critically important programs. And these are some of the largest levels of funding that we've ever seen right now. And we need more voices to be part of that as well.
Thank you, John. Need money? Ask John.
You got it right. I can Venmo you, right?
I'll take $1 billion.
You get $1 billion, you get $1 billion. Everybody gets internet.
Cut that part of the tape. So this is interesting because I don't work at Brookings. I don't work in the space of programmatic design, or I don't work for a corporation. And I'm excited to hear as I listen to this, because I was feeling kind of old for my friend here for a moment in terms of how long we've been doing this work, about all the programmatic options that we have today that we didn't have in the early 2000s when President Clinton and Larry Irvin actually declared the state of emergency around the digital divide. And there's a couple things I just want to add to what we've heard programmatically, and then to your question, like, you know, where do we go from here sort of question. Obviously, there's a lot of money, but the other thing that is also downplayed is the fact that there's a lot of money for Black entrepreneurs and minority-owned businesses. Somebody's got to build all the fiber and build out the fiber. Somebody's got to actually create the facilities for this. And we should not go into these programs thinking that it's only allocated to grandma and grandpa and auntie and uncle. This is actually about us building what Dr. Fallon Wilson always talks about, ecosystems. And that ecosystem can leverage federal support to allow us to go into the future of technologies with much better infrastructure to respond to the needs of our communities and respond to the needs of our business. A lot of people did not pick this up during the pandemic, but Black businesses permanently closed because of the lack of ability to transition to online platforms. We couldn't do it. We didn't have the resources, we didn't have the training, we didn't have the skills, and we are pertinent to our communities because we hire people just like us. So I know I'm speaking to some Black entrepreneur and I'm speaking to some Black-owned business. This is for you too, because somebody has to do the work, and that work is gonna be increasingly important going forward, as will the Affordable Connectivity Program, because what we often miss is we're actually doing affordability programs so we can sustain these networks. Networks need customers, businesses who build networks need customers, and people need help to be able to get on those networks. And over the course of the presidential administrations that we've had over the course of decades, we've not done that right, nor have we done right the ability to embed that capacity in our communities. That's why for me, when you ask me like, where's the step forward? The step forward is us to think about ourselves, stop thinking about ourselves as being part of the digital divide. I am so sorry, if you have a phone in this room, raise your hand, because you are all part of the new economy. Whether you like it or not, you are engaging every day in making trade-offs to be a participant in this economy. There is a social tax if you're not connected. You pay more because you gotta use a telephone. You actually waste more of your time because you're not as productive. And there are other social taxes that we actually experience. When I went on tour for my book, I went to a community where it took 2 hours, because it was very rural, for a caseworker to get to a person's home, 2 hours to get back to put the information into a computer, and 2 weeks before they got back, and by that time that person was dead. We are fatalities in this ecosystem that is being built by our country and by our global world if we don't pay attention to this. So I'm sort of suggesting to people, yes, we are solving the digital divide, but we're actually crafting what it means to have universal access to communication services in this country, period. And we just have a lot more money under our president and vice president to get it done, and a lot more will from companies to be a part of that ecosystem building. But as my friends in this space commonly remind me, ecosystems consist of our churches, our community-based organizations, our businesses, our schools, our households, our families, our parks, our housing, It is all of the above. And so anyone in this room who looks at this conversation as, well, that's the telecom tech issue, it's actually everybody's issue. And that's what actually keeps me up at night. Will we have a country that we can fulfill the vacancies in cybersecurity, STEM, data science, artificial intelligence, because we have kids who can put the power of technology in their hands? Or will we be able to take the requirement in the statute that we have workforce as one of the statute requirements, and we'll put people to work in our communities? Because you don't need no PhD to pull fiber. You just need some good legs and some courage to get on the ladder, because it's pretty high, right? But you don't need some of the faculties that we've needed in the past to actually get that done. And so again, I always like to bring the grown-up perspective to this. You know, I know I look under 25 because, you know, black don't crack, but listen, we got to talk about the grown-up perspective alongside some of the nascent energy that has been brewing about digital connectivity post-pandemic.
Can I just add one more thing about the anchor just real quick. In the plans, every single anchor institution, every church, school, library, community center needs to be in the plan and identified whether or not they're good service or not. And then there is a process to make sure that they are included in the plan to make sure they're connected. So that's a great way to help everybody.
And you need to tell them all those plans are online.
And all the plans are online. You just go online, come to our website at NTIA. All the plans are online. Read them, download, speak up. But make sure every who goes to church? Make sure every church there, every K-12, every school is part of the plan as well too. Just be clear about that.
And can I add, I'm going to do one shameless plug, you know, from the company side of this of the panel up here. But I think, you know, going back to the point that Nicole mentioned a moment ago for entrepreneurs, a lot of us have programs that are actually offering skills and services, grants, and trainings to people to get online. For Comcast, we have the Comcast Rise program. You heard Justice mention Grow with Google, and I think if you go to any of the major telecom and tech companies, there's something there of resources where you can either apply or that are just automatically free for you online to be able to, as an entrepreneur, gain skills that you want, as a business that's trying to go digital to gain free educational resources to help you be able to make that transition. So I want to just put that out there for anybody who is an entrepreneur. I'd just like us to have active plans as we're also talking about all of the challenges that we face.
No, it's a fair point. Thank you all for your comments, and again, for being here today. You know, it's fascinating, right? When we get to talking about advancements in the digital space and how they come to affect our society, it's very clear that the path forward is a collective one and a cross-disciplinary one, right? I think kind of on the subject of that and speaking to the workforce, right? Generative AI is kind of the term on everybody's lips and the curiosity that's occupying most everyone's brains right now. The past 6 months, we've seen an explosion of development of these systems. Along with that, it's moved conversations about the potential for worker displacement. The question for you all is, in what ways can, again, government, industry, nonprofit, help black workers thrive during this transition?
I'm happy to hop in if you allow
Oh,
me.
I saw you was ready.
I was ready and thrilled, and I
Yes,
promise I
indeed.
won't hog the floor. But let me
Time
just
do we have?
Telling
Yeah,
you, right? You done opened up a whole new panel.
exactly. Let me just emphatically state that it is impossible to overstate the transformative power of AI applications and this moment that we're all facing right now. It just is. However, that does not mean that we go into this blindly and not acknowledging aware of the risks that are ever present, right? And I think I just want to kind of ground the conversation to note that generative AI is but one piece of a larger technology transition puzzle that we're all facing, like collage, I should say, mosaic that we're facing, right? And that AI applications are so much more than just chatbots and Bard, I might add, ChatGPT, not to impugn others, but also, Bard is Google's offering here. And so that it is critical that we are cognizant of the fact that these systems and applications should be appropriated and working for human ingenuity, to advance human skill and creativity, and not as a kind of a replacement or a substitute for what we know to be just kind of the brilliance of human creativity, and that in our own community. And then I'll just maybe kind of stress and underline the fact that as we go into this moment, and I think this question around ecosystem approaches, right, is so critical, right? That we are, again, these utilities serve human beings, right? And so we have to be able to think outside of the box, imagine that there actually, in fact, is no box, right? And use and appropriate these tools for advancing this work, right? And so I just will just underline and stress that we're doing this together. It requires a pool of technologists and practitioners, interdisciplinary work to harness this moment, and that we, at least at Google, are ready and looking forward to working alongside communities everywhere to do this work, because it requires all of us to kind of roll our sleeves up and get into it. So
No,
I'll pause
absolutely.
there.
Absolutely.
Can I jump? Oh. you wanna jump in?
Yeah, I'll keep it real short.
Sure. All right.
Yeah, I'll keep it real short. So I may be one of the few people in the room that has a 25-year history with artificial intelligence. So I go back to the mid-90s when I was a grad student learning AI, using it for geographic information systems and so forth, using for predicting policy interventions and so forth. I've got a grant now with the National Institute of Health on precision health, right? So this is a very important area for artificial intelligence. Can we look at what we eat? I was eating cookies in the green room. But what does that mean for me down the road, and being able to predict and understand that? There's an embedded digital divide issue. First of all, digital divide, AI matters because we need everybody to participate so these tools can be trained well. Our queries that we ask on ChatGPT and generative tools help to train those tools better. And we're trying to train it so that they can understand subtle meaning of things and what things mean. It's very important. But there is a divide that comes with it, like in precision health. You've got to wear 12, 13 different devices in order we can measure everything that's coming in and everything that's going out, if you get my meaning. And so there's a divide there to be able to report. So they kind of go hand in glove. But this is an area where everybody needs to use these tools in order for the tools to get better as well. And I'm going to keep it there because I know she's got a lot to say about that.
I really
that's where
do.
the deficiencies are, because we're not in the training tools, the training models. That's where the biases are. And then we're relying on this for making decisions and so forth.
It's an excellent point. Nicole, please.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, let me level set, because I think we assume that everybody knows what this technology is, right? When we start thinking about artificial intelligence tools, they're obviously based in autonomous systems that are trained on data sets, training data, that make predictions around repetitive functions that we actually engage. So this is actually an area that I work very closely with at Brookings when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and bias. And so generative AI, the best definition I've ever heard is like having eyes in the back of your head. It doesn't create new predictable data. It curates and scans the data that is already existing. So anything you have in the digital footprint, it can pick up on, and it can synergize that, translate it into things that become new products. Now, for our professions, that works in high intense professions where there's a lot of aggregating, content aggregating, review. Lawyers are using it because it allows them to scan what used to take 10 hours of case files. You can actually ask the generative AI. I'm a PhD in sociology. We use that to sort of understand settled literature when it comes to the things that we study. Now we're seeing doctors use it. Doctors are using it in medical cases because now that all of our health records are electronic, they can use that to message the notes to come up with some type of synopsis to determine a disease or preventative strategy. On that side of it, as with any technology, there's always a good side and there's a nefarious side or a bad side. Here's the challenge. I love my friends over here, but there's a couple of problems with this. First and foremost, the training data that we use on generative AI systems is traumatized. We all in this room have a history of interaction with this country and society that comes from a very colonialist, oppressive perspective. So what does that mean? In the non-generative side, it means that when we develop algorithms for criminal justice, we have a higher likelihood of incarcerating, retaining, not offering bail to people who are black and brown because we are overly represented in those databases. And more so, we are actually having higher rates of interaction with institutional authorities. Everybody in this room probably had an interaction for some reason with a school disciplinarian, a social worker, a cousin who had an interaction with a social worker. That information is gathered and it's used to give predictability through these algorithms. What's challenging about generative AI is because it's curated in the back of our head, it's based on large language models, meaning it scans the internet for text. It scans it for images. It scans it for voice. People like Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, for example, has this bill out right now called the Deepfakes Act, which is trying to watermark where images come from. So again, there's a positive side to it, but there's a deceptive side. People who don't go to vote because somebody called them up on the phone who sounded like their cousin and told them don't go to the polls. People who are not represented in those data sets. We have a piece coming out at Brookings about generative AI and large language models being used in ways that oppress language. It is trained on language that sometimes is not ours. I know y'all got somebody who said, I'm fitting to go to the store. That's not showing up in generative AI because that's not the king's language. My point is, we always, as communities, the same way with the digital divide and the same thing that my friends are talking about, we have to see both sides of it. And we also have to recognize that many of the people who are interrogating these models, if I can say it, we are hidden figures. Katherine Johnson died at 102, and it took 4 years to recognize who she was at NASA to avert some of the most fatal, critical missions to space. There are tons of black women in this space, black people in this space, who are hidden figures whose voices are not being heard. I think that keeps me up the most at night. Because nobody wants to be memorialized for trying to keep our system safe, inclusive, lawful, and responsible. So I think as we look at these tools the same way we're looking at the digital divide, my friends, we have to continuously ask ourselves, what is the outcome? How is it going to benefit the long-term ecosystem building that we're trying to create? What's the institutional strategy to involve me or erase me? And how do I get involved as a person who uses it to leverage the opportunities that it may afford, but interrogate those that it may not help me with?
Now look, she said she was gonna take you to church, so I mean, you know, again, I really wanna thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to our wonderful audience for staying for this conversation. I do apologize, we don't have time to get into any audience questions on this stage right now, but keep an eye out for our panelists because they'll be floating around, and you can ask your questions in a sidebar. And I welcome you to go to the Joint Center website to learn about more information related to all the topics that we're talking about today. The next session will start at 11:15. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.